Vasistha continued, O Ram, the mind itself is the jiva. The mind experiences what it itself has projected out of itself. By that it is bound. It is the state of the mind that determines the nature of the reincarnation of the jiva. So we're getting into this reincarnation territory again. But you could say it's the state of the mind which actually determines this incarnation. Now, we want to get away from this idea that somebody's social circumstances, the nature, the circumstances they were born into, is somehow their fault. This is an idea which has no merit whatsoever. But what we could say is we are responsible to a large extent for our own psychological suffering. And this is the sort of thing that we have to understand. This is the sort of light we have to understand this kind of thing in. We often see it, people that are anxious, nervous, and there's no reason for it. They've whipped themselves up into this kind of state, and they're largely responsible for that themselves. And so it's psychological suffering that we can say people are often responsible for, or should take more responsibility for, and that's based on their relationship with the world. They see the world in certain ways. They've got a way of relating to it. And this is the state of mind that determines the nature of the individual. This is a state, this is what's meant by the reincarnation or the incarnation of the jiva. It's all to do with your relationship with the world. One who wishes to be a king dreams that he has become king. What one intensely wishes for, he obtains sooner or later. If the mind is impure, its effects are also impure. If it is pure, its products are pure too. The noble man engages himself in noble spiritual pursuits, even in straitened circumstances. Well, we didn't quite find that in the story of King Lavana, who found himself living in a tribal village, and there certainly wasn't any mention of noble spiritual pursuits. But one who wishes to be king dreams that he has become king. It depends what your psychological tendencies are. If your psychological tendencies are towards suffering and pessimism, that's how you'll experience things. If they're towards optimism, that's how you'll experience things. There is neither bondage nor liberation in truth. The infinite thinks, I am the body, and this thought acts as bondage. So this is belief, isn't it? We're talking about the power of belief here. So it's really important that your beliefs are, if you're going to operate according to beliefs, which is very difficult not to do, then you might as well make sure your beliefs are of the highest order and are acting for your own benefit and everybody else's. So if you've got the belief that I am the body, which many people do, they might not say they've got that belief, but they certainly behave as if they've got that belief. That thought acts as bondage. When one realizes that all these are false, he shines as the infinite consciousness. This is when you come back to your own awareness. When the mind has been purified by thoughts and actions, it takes on the nature of the infinite, even as a pure cloth takes on a colour easily. When in a pure mind there arise concepts and notions of a body, scriptural knowledge and dispassion, etc., the world appearance comes into being. Well, that's a bit of a shock, isn't it? Scriptural knowledge, dispassion, this is what we've been talking about, or what the Yoga Vasistha has been talking about. The world appearance comes into being. So when we've got concepts and notions, it doesn't actually matter how lofty they are, they still lead us into delusion. When the mind gets involved in the external objective universe, or in notions of an external objective universe, it moves away from the self. But when the mind gives up the subject-object relationship it has with the world, it is instantly absorbed in the infinite. So it says it moves away from the self. It's not in the sense of being selfless. It's actually quite selfish to move away from the self. The self here is awareness, primordial awareness. The mind has no existence apart from the infinite consciousness. It did not exist in the beginning, it will not exist in the end, and so it does not now. One who thinks that it does exist holds sorrow in his hand. That's a notion, isn't it? If you think it exists, it's a belief. Even if you think it doesn't exist, that's still a belief. He who knows that this world is the self in reality goes beyond that sorrow, and this world gives him both joy and liberation. The mind is not but ideas and notions. There we have it. Who will grieve when such a mind comes to an end? We are so attached to our beliefs and notions. But once you give them up, it's great. The reality is consciousness, which is the middle between the seer and the object. So it's the middle between the seer and the object. Here's the seer, there's the object. What's in the middle? In the middle is the seeing, is the experiencing. That's all there actually is. That's awareness. Awareness doing its thing, really. This reality is veiled by the mind and revealed when the mind ceases. It's revealed when it's not when the mind ceases as such, it's when it's because these notions and ideas which constitute the mind, they carry on because we've got to use them to engage with the world, to engage with our everyday life. But we can step beyond them. So it's when their hold ceases, it's when their delusory power cease, and we can step beyond them. That's when the veil is lifted. When the mind's conditioning ceases, or when it's transcended, then ignorance, craving, desires and aversions, delusion, stupidity, fear, and ideations come to an end. Purity, auspiciousness and goodness arise. One enjoys the delight of self-knowledge. That's a nice phrase, the delight of self-knowledge. Because it can have its own flavour, or aspects of the psyche can still infiltrate it, and it's good to be reminded that it's actually delightful. You can rest in it. He who has an intelligence that has been rendered pure by the destruction of all inner impurities has his heart illumined by the light of the self obtained through inquiry into the self. Seeing the worthlessness of birth and death, he dwells without fear or anxiety in the city which is the body. Well, he doesn't really dwell in the body, but he's quite happy to go along with that way of talking. The worthlessness of birth and death. It's the worthlessness again of notions of birth and death.